What parts of the digital marketplace do you think are changing the fastest right now?
Everything. I mean, it's all the pieces. Social is becoming a different way of looking at, from Facebook and changing their algorithms and how we talk to our consumers there, to how video is now playing a part of our traditional advertising and the new fronts and discussing content on that side, to display and modeling. I mean, it's taking agencies now, and the efforts that we're putting behind it is bringing those people together to share in that knowledge, but focus it.
Got it. Content is becoming so sexy to brands at this point. Like, you feel like every brand is going, we got to have some content, we're going to do some content, we're going to try this, we're going to try that. What's changed that's made it so accessible in the minds of the marketers?
Well, first of all, it's not about drinking the Kool-Aid, right? And you can't do everything that you read in the front page of the New York Times either. I mean, it's exciting and it's all great that what marketers are doing, but it has to make sense for the brand. Right, so it's just like when social, everyone was like, I need my Facebook page, I need a Twitter, I need all these things. The content part of it is, it's accessible. It's very easy to go out and work with publishers, leverage what you're doing. I think that's where agencies are using those relationships. You're working with the NBCs, the CBSs, when you're doing those big global deals or the bigger upfront relationships, you're sitting there going, look, this is about content as well now. It's not about just placing my ad in my GRPs, but now what am I going to gain from that relationship and making that content as a part of the extension in what you're trying to do. And Jordan had talked about earlier, is it advertising or is it content, or does advertising fit within it? And it's really kind of blended all together.
Right. When you go into those relationships with an NBC, and it's this broad stroke feel type of a program where you could spend a lot of money at once, get all the reach that you want, and you just kind of just blast everything. Yeah. How is that changing now, and how are brands starting to look at, and how are you at agencies starting to look at, well, maybe we shouldn't just pour the paint all over the place. Maybe we should look at the different areas we can kind of color in much nicer.
Yeah, it's exactly it. I mean, in the past, I talk like it was 20, 30 years ago. In the past, it was the new fronts and the upfronts were sort of going in and saying, well, I'll spend X amount of dollars and then we'll try to figure it out later. Sure. Now I got to figure it out now before I even go and spend, because is the content that you really have across an entire network valuable? How can I use it? And then also, how do I tie, again, the brand into all that, both from a contextual relevancy, but authentically? It's picking and choosing what makes the most sense. It's not about just, oh, well, if we're buying NBC, for example, then it makes sense. Everything on NBC makes sense. And that's not the way that we're thinking about it anymore. It's about, what are those programs that I could tie into? Where are the FEP? Where can I go and take advantage of content that's specifically to us, from an advertising, but then what can they help create for us that they've got an attribute? I kind of use this idea of bar brand equity, right? So look, I've got brands, and obviously we know that we've got equity in the marketplace, but consumers engage with the NBCs, those publishers, and that content because they enjoy it. They trust it. As we were talking about earlier, there's a built-in trust. How do I take that trust and align myself in that way and do it so that at the end of the day it feels, to all those other points, authentic, drives business, and how can I measure it? That's the biggest issue right now.
So it sounds a lot of talking about a brand going into that sphere of influence of that media brand and reaching their audience, reaching the audience that they want to reach through their audience. What about the brand originating content? At what point does a brand say, you know what, we're going to make our own thing. We're going to have our own platform. We're going to use our own social platforms to do it and distribute that. At what point does a brand start thinking that way?
Well, I think most are. Again, but the difficulty is that you've got a Facebook, for example. So we think about that, right? I have all these wonderful channels. I got my YouTube channels, and a lot of our clients are going out and creating those relationships and building very specific content for themselves. For example, Subway with 49ers.
Right.
It's award-winning. It's done amazing. It really feeds that brand into, and no pun intended, but really authentically into a series. It's something that a lot of people watch. How do you really build value for it but extend it? The social networks are continually at times making it even harder to talk to people that we already have as a part of our brand. Sure. Facebook, for example, I can't even reach 1% of my likes anymore. So I went and built this huge, wonderful home, and all these people are in it, and now I can't even talk to the people in it.
You're cut off from them, basically.
Yeah, so that's the difficulty. So I think back to your publisher example is, how do I then leverage that? How do I take the things that I've created, but also work with those publishers to help me distribute that content? How do I use their influence? How do I use their community to now communicate out through their Twitter, through their Facebook, other touch points that may help?
At what point does a brand become a publisher?
You know what? That's funny. It's interesting because I think that they're all trying to be, to some degree. That goes to your question earlier, is that creating your own content. They're all trying to do that in some way, but I think the difficulty is always going back to your real strategic thinking for the brand and what are you trying to gain. I'm all for creating movies and creating all series and all these things that are really about the brand and putting ourselves in that position. But if I can't align that value or that expense to a business goal, then why are we doing it, right? So there's also times that you got to look at things and going, is it a media decision or is it a business decision? You know, so is it a media decision because it's smart, it reaches a lot of people, but from a business decision, is it really driving anything? You know, did you spend $500,000 to create your own content when at the end of the day, people aren't going there or not doing anything?
You know, there's so many opportunities for brands to work and partner up with those creators that are online that have massive reach already.
Absolutely.
You know, you take a Freddie Wong in the gaming space particular, 6 million plus subscribers, amazing engagement with his audience. How do you get over this challenge of, I've never heard of him, he must not be any good? In these influencers world, when it's sometimes so easy to go, oh yeah, we'll do something with NBC. I know Community, I know that show, that's great, I like that show.
Yeah.
Let's do that there.
Well, that almost sits with the same conversation when you go in with, I mean, it's not happening as much now, when you first sat down with clients and the guy would, a CMO or someone that we're talking with, go, my kid doesn't surf online. Oh, then my job is completely out of the business. Right? If your kid doesn't surf online, then no one's doing it. If you didn't hear about him, that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's the agency's job, as we're doing now, is looking at who are those key influencers. But remember something, and I've been doing this for a long time, so at the end of the day, when we were doing, I'd send T-shirts to the kid who had the influence, and he'd just wear the T-shirt in his YouTube video.
Right.
That wasn't creating content. It was using their influence or just who they were talking to. So it's not that it's so new. I think it's getting a lot of attention now. But now what we're doing is we're adding a layer of accountability. That's why this is getting attention. Content's always been there. The content creation, brands trying to weave themselves. I mean, look at how the original daytime shows. Right? I mean, that was brands weaving themselves into content and sponsoring that content. Now we're just sitting here going, well, it's more important because all of a sudden we're saying it's accountable. We actually can track this. We can tell you what it's doing for the brands.
So we've got the measurement tools, we've got the accountability factor, we know the platforms, we know how to measure them, we know how to work with them, we have case studies. We have case studies. It's obviously always evolving and new platforms are coming in, but we pretty much have a really good repeatable process, an iterative process, to use that language again. What's missing from brands really exploiting the full power of content marketing? What's
cross
really
touch
missing?
point? So everything that you just said was about putting it there, putting it where, right? It's taking advantage of the Xbox Live. It's taking advantage of Windows 8. It's taking advantage of
But why aren't they taking advantage? They're all there. All those platforms are there, but they're not taking advantage. Why?
Because how do you weave the content into those environments and taking advantage of them together? So is there engagement opportunities within a gaming environment, console-based, into a Windows-based environment that ties into your mobile, right? How do you bring that feeling, that communication, that content through all those touch points and still have it whole? Not break it apart.
Is that a lack of a skill set on the agency side, or is it a lack of understanding on the marketer side?
It could be both. I mean, it's interesting. It's something that I think that's our next evolution. The evolution of thinking about the content creation, we're there. I mean, people are creating that content, and we take a step forward, we take a step back with social and how we can do that. I think the next step is, how do I now deal with fragmentation? how do I deal with, now I'm creating all this content, how do I deal with it in the mobile space, where the tablet space, I mean, you're sitting here, you'd normally have a notebook. You're writing on your iPad. I mean, it's funny how we're now engaging in that way. So how do I take that content that I've spent so much time doing, that's really for the brand, and making sure that I'm doing it in a way that now it's engaging and trackable from an engagement perspective. Even that I have a hard time with. We're really taking a lot of time with our clients now from the analytics side and saying, what really is engagement? What does that mean? Is it click-through? Is it time spent? Is it views? Is it unique views? You know, the online campaign ratings, all those things, right? So it's using that across all those different fragmented touch points. You know, is it cinema? Right? How do you, and even that, an old medium, quote old medium, taking content, we rarely sit there and go, this is great 2-minute content that we just created. Why aren't we putting it in theaters more? Why aren't we creating that type of engagement touch point through? Right?
Panel, what would you tell, Jordan, what would you tell a marketer who has to lead their brand through such an uncertain and fragmented media landscape? What do you tell them?
You got to go through that fragmented media landscape because we don't have a choice. That's the way the landscape is right now. So you don't choose your landscape; you're given it, and you've got to navigate those waters. But you don't have to go all the way in, depending on your risk threshold, depending on your objectives, depending on your budgets,
Where your consumers are. I mean,
your audience, your prior experience. It all dictates how you need to move through these waters, but you do have to move because not moving really isn't an option. Advertising, marketing is changing every single day, and if you just stay stagnant, you're going to actually stand out for your lack of authenticity or lack of relevance, as we were talking about earlier, rather than being part of a movement.
Adam, what would you say?
I'm going to be a little party pooper, but I mean, I think there is an operational challenge, and that is the people that are in charge of spending money, I think, still find it easier to spend it in other areas. And that may be because we're used to do that, or because there aren't really packaged opportunity to spend a lot of money at once on content marketing, and that may be still an operational challenge. But I think when you and I had meeting, when people told me in the 21st century, told me we would much prefer to have a banner pop over the homepage over spending money. I mean, people told me that was a great success. But and I asked them, would you do it again? And they said, well, it is easier to spend money on display homepage. And I think there's a challenge there, because who's pushing them? Is the push coming from the agency side, or the push coming from the brand side, or where's the push going to come from? And I think it's going to come from one of them. It's either we'll see more success coming from brands, and then there's going to be competition to do what they do, and then we'll see more budgets coming in, or someone is going to make it easier to spend money in content marketing in a non-uber fragmented way. So I'm not sure what exactly is the problem, but I think we need to see as an industry a shift from search budgets, from display budgets, to content marketing budgets. I don't know if you guys agree, but I think there's still a challenge of spending enough money there, and then and that's really the big thing that needs to change.
As I was saying, is it more important to get the search budgets, or is it more important to get the TV budgets?
Well, that's an interesting conversation, because it's where, look, to me, I don't care where it really comes from, because at the end of the day, what we're doing now is we're actually aligning to those verticals, right? So it's what, at the end of the day, is going to drive the business. What is, so it's not about stealing from one to the other. If this one isn't as efficient and as effective as these other four things, then so be it. And it's not just about the spending as well as it's the connection, right? For us, we've got this new mantra about content connection. It's connecting with those consumers in a way that makes it, again, engaging. And so it's, when you're sitting down and looking at budgets, we're doing it not like, oh, well, let's all sit around the table and fight each other for how much. It's, at the end of the day, which of those contribute to a business need, successes, and then how does it get divvied out.